for a free-for-all.
Okay, well, this is where I ref. There are now a battle royal going on. No, I'm just kidding. No. Okay, so per Stacy's request, I stopped the previous recording. This is now the after, this is the green room now, okay? After we're all off stage. But it's still being recorded because I think there's still some gems that we can extract from this.
Well, I'm going to stay and hang out, but I need to get some coffee going and grab a little food. So, but I'm here and I'm interested in continuing.
There's a
Something
meditation,
this.
the technique. Who's talking? Joel, was that you?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to mention the technique used by meditators to quieten the frustrations and complexity of the mind. And the breathing technique. Why do they use breathing techniques? And it's simple, because when you focus on your breathing, you've moved the focus away from those other thoughts and you direct them on your breathing, so you quieten that area of your mind immediately. And the tensing and releasing the limbs of your body as you go around your body and breathe and release the breath and breathe and release allows you to further focus away from the monkey chatter in the mind to the body, brings you back to the present. So that's a great technique. It's in those moments when the brain waves are changed to beta waves or more in a restful state that you can introduce a word, a trigger word that you'd be able to use when you're in a stressful state. You just repeat that trigger word a few times while you're meditating, and it's a tool. It's an item to put in the toolbox because it'll be handy in some other situation when you're angered or when you're depressed or when you're overexcited or overtired or over hungry. And you don't want to get a resentment against anyone who's pressing your buttons. And then you've got that ability to respond rather than react. Over.
I think Sam's going to teach us Tai Chi one day. Sorry, I didn't mean for you to.
No, actually, I used to take my daughter to school. It's about a 15 or 20-minute walk each way, but it passes by this local park. So after I dropped my daughter off at school, I would come back and stop in the park and do Tai Chi. And it would be 10 minutes of warm-ups and probably about 20 to 30 minutes of Tai Chi. And there would be other people walking in the park, usually in the morning. This is about 8 o'clock in the morning. So several times, probably a dozen or 2 dozen times, people come up and say, hey, would you teach me? And I would say, I'm not a teacher, but I'd love to share with you, what I'm experiencing, and, hopefully you get a taste of it. And some people would keep coming out with me for up to 6 months at a time. And they would learn half the 24 posture form. I don't think anybody ever hung out for more than about 6 or 7 months doing that. But yeah, I love sharing what I love. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a certified teacher. I'm not a master. I'm not anything like that. But I just like sharing what I know about what Tai Chi helps me do. And days for me go more smoothly when I started with Tai Chi, or I've had a nice string of days where I've actually been doing Tai Chi. So that's what I do notice. So that's what I'd like to share.
I'm going to go on YouTube and try some Tai Chi today, Sam, because I need to do something like that. So I want to share a story of me in really bad form, and I developed a reputation as a result of it. So when my kid was in junior high, he went to public school, and he'd come home every day and complain about this kid calling him a fag. And it was really upsetting to him. And he had trouble going to teachers and saying, this kid's calling me a fag, it's a big school. And I didn't feel like anything was being done about it. And I didn't feel like my kid had like a safe place at school. And I was sick of it. I was sick of hearing about this kid. So I told my son, like, all right, I'm going to give you a ride to school tomorrow, and I want you to point this kid out to me, and I'm going to say something to him. And so we get to school. I walk in the school, go down the hall. We get to my, we're walking along, and here comes the kid. And my son is like, that's him, that's him, that's him. And so I say hello to the kid. I'm like, hi, are you Mike? And he's like, yeah. And he's tiny. He's like the tiniest little kid. And I'm like, Mike, do you call my son a fag? And he's like, what? And, my kid's standing right behind me like, oh my God. And as soon as I said, do you call my son a fag? All the other kids around, all their little radars went whoosh. And the kid's like, what? I'm like, do you not like gay people? And he's like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, in my family, we really like gay people. And I don't understand why you would call my son that name. He's not gay. Kennedy, are you gay? My kids are there like, no. But I'm intimidating this kid. I'm standing really tall over him, looking down. I've got him in a tight little space. All the other kids are around him. And then I look over and I see this school cop who's like, what's going on? And I think a kid actually went to him and it's like, hey, there's a mom over there talking to this kid. And this cop starts coming down on them. And then it dawns on me how insanely inappropriate my behavior was, like over the top inappropriate. And then it dawns on me like, wow, I could really be in some trouble here for coming onto school grounds, going into the school and bullying this kid, which is exactly what I was doing. I wanted him to stop teasing my kid. And the cop like waves at the principal, and now the principal and the cop are coming after me. And my son's like, oh, mom. And he's like down the hall. And the cop's like, what are you doing? What are you doing here? And I'm like, I'm talking to this boy. And he's like, you can't do that. Come with us. And they marched me into the principal's office. So now I'm in the principal's office and they are pissed off at me that I took this into my own hands. And so the principal and the cop are sitting there and they're lecturing me. And I'm like, look, he calls my kid my son a fag every day, blah, blah, blah. And the first thing the principal says is, your son is an instigator. And I'm like, what? And he goes on to say, I bet there's another side to this story. So now he's like bashing on my kid. Anyway, I told them I apologized for coming onto school property, that next time I would come to them. And they're like, well, why didn't you? It just turned into an ugly situation. And, but I wouldn't back down. And if I had it to do all over again, I definitely would not have done that, because that kid was probably really kind of scarred by that. I humiliated him. I humiliated him in front of his friends. And then I found out later that my son would call him short, like make fun of him because he was short. So my kid did have a part in it that he left out of this story. And it was bad. I should never have done that. But I was this mother bear that wanted blood from making my kid cry. And so yeah, that was a bad situation. And I was not allowed to come back in the school ever again. I was banned from the school property as that crazy mom, and so yeah, that was not, but my kid went around bragging about what a badass his mom was, but yeah, to, a little tiny boy. So that wasn't good. But my kids know now that if anybody bothers them, I'm not scared to try to solve it. But yeah, it was not good. And I expected a phone call from that kid's parents, honestly, saying like, what the fuck? And if the parent had gone in and done that to my son, I would have been hopping mad. So yeah, did not handle that well, would have done it a lot differently next time. So there's my I'm ashamed of myself story.
That reminded me of something that my mother once did when I was, for whatever reason, my friends had turned against me. I was about, I'm going to say maybe 12. And we would go away in the summer. So it was always the same group of families. And these were my really close friends, one who is still my really close friend to this day. But for whatever reason, they decided that they didn't want me to be part of the group anymore. I don't even remember what the reason was. It was my cousin. It was my cousin, two friends that I really did feel close to, and one friend that was always like the third in one of the other relationships. And girls especially know that three girls together is usually not good. There's some weird dynamics that females tend to have more than men do, at least when they're younger. But anyway, and it actually, that's one of the times I think about that made me more empathetic, because I realized, I mean, I spent a few days. It only lasted a few days, by the way. But those were a few days where not only was I devastated, but I spent more time really with nature or talking to little kids or just whatever. But my mother, for whatever reason, became very worried because another adult whose daughter had committed suicide presented to my mother that this is where it starts. So for whatever reason, a bug went off. So my mother had a very different upbringing than I did. She was used to being on the streets and she was a fighter and she was tough. And I remember her very uncharacteristically, because she would be really quiet in the summertime. And, you know, everybody loved her. You know, the young girls loved her. She was really pretty and she was fun to talk to. But she came out and she singled each one of them out. And you're her cousin. And she went through it. But then she got like tears in her eyes because she was so upset and so angry. And I know it shocked me. I had never seen my mother cry. Never. But not only did it shock me, it shocked them. And it was probably and she told them, stay away from her, whatever. Within a few days, one at a time, each one reached out to me, wanting me to like take them back. But it was just a very interesting dynamic. But when I hear, I mean, because we do want to defend, and how do we defend and not cross that line to becoming a bully ourselves? And that's really what I practice on Facebook all the time. And I like to see people learn how to come to somebody's aid without being so totally rude to these other people, in these groups. I saw somebody, Colin, somebody was into what?
That's the question. And it depends. It always depends, of course, on sometimes you just have to walk away. And one thing about my childhood bullying, I didn't get bullied in high school, but this was more in junior high school. And it's funny, I think the same person attempted to bully me a little later in life, and I had been separated from them because they had been removed from the school system. And so I hadn't seen them for a few years. And the thing is, they're very sociopathic. They would be friendly to you, and then they fight you, and then be friendly. So they suck you in, accept you, and then they fight with you, right? And that's a pattern, I guess, for them. So yeah, it was like I enough time had gone by that the person who was bullied was the old me. It wasn't the person I was now. Like, I'm like, enough time had been separated. Because we grew up in the same neighborhood. As kids, we would play, right? But since I was older, doing different things, involved in other things, working, making money, driving cars, and just away from that whole world, when that person came back, and I could tell that they felt like no time had passed between us. And I felt like a lot of time had passed. So that's retrospective on that kind of a thing, where I think you can grow stronger and learn lessons. And I think Joel mentioned too one time that it's probably good to have these lessons. You learn skepticism and things, and you learn to think for yourself a lot more. And you don't have to go calling rule zero because you can find a way to deal with it. But in this group, it was recorded. And to me, that was different. And me and Sam have a difference of opinion on that. But I do see Sam's intention, and it's a good one. So it's up for me to control how I act and how I respond to being triggered in context. So that means it's a bit contrived because it's not prepared. So you have to pull back. I think Jazz Wonder said that too. It's like, I'm not going to talk about these things anymore because, you know, and I've heard, so, you know, and that's why I think the Friday is not recorded, so that you can have more of a telenovela with your friends, as opposed to giving stories maybe that, you know, I call this a show because it could reach the world, right? When I'm talking, I'm not just talking to faces here. I'm aware of the fact that this could go far, but we get fooled because, like, I think we got shown with reality TV. They put the cameras all up in the corners, and for the first couple of weeks, everybody's nervous of the cameras, and then they forget about the cameras, and then they start acting like themselves. So yourself does come out. I'm not perfect by any means, but I do feel like I'm misunderstood and doing a little bit of the impossible here, because I do feel like a fish out of water here, because I don't want all this sharing connection, right? I want to actually try to get involved in making tools for conversation to go better. What's a better way to learn about conversation than have a bunch of difficult ones, right? But I do stand by my guns, and maybe more than I should, but I feel like I have to defend science. I feel like sometimes I feel like I have to defend myself. And I don't like to be in that defensive mode. And that's what bullying does to you. It makes you feel like you have to be defensive. So one of the things that takes time, and it's not easy, is like I've been pushing lately in the group, the 10 commandments of rational conversation, or of the 10 commandments of conversation. Anyway, they're out there. And I think if we could all take those to heart, we would never get to the third layer of either the conversation would stop before you got there and you'd know why you're stopping the conversation. You'd know what your difference is. But the manipulation and the tactics by violating these 10 rules, 10 commandments of rational debate, that's where people manipulate. And, you know, I was cringing at Tyra's story. Like, that just made me cringe. Because I could see how when the principal was coming down the hallway, it clicked. Like, oops, I should have done this a different way. And so I feel that in order to have the difficult conversations, especially, it's easy to have conversations where everybody agrees with you. But where do we find the time and the space to unpack things to a level that we can actually start to understand? It takes time. Like, so I get frustrated at people trying to, and myself, trying to put our points into sound bites or quickies. So, so yeah, the feeling of being understood and following the laws, the commandments, or whatever they call them, of conversations, basically not committing the 10 most top fallacies: ad hominem, straw manning, and continue on. You know, dichotomies. Jazz has brought that up a few times, thinking that I didn't know what it was, right? So it's like insulting. Asking me to define science, like, go ask a kid in grade 7 what science is, right? That's what science is. Look it up yourself. If you don't know what science, if you want to know what science means to me, it's quite simple, right? But I find it, you know, a bit demeaning to ask me to define science when I'm not even a scientist, but I still have to defend science. And the strange part is because I'm defining science, people think I'm closed-minded to things I don't understand, which is another dichotomy and fallacy. So we get wrapped up all in this, and we have no ways of signaling in a space like this big, other than just, you know, I'm bringing the point to Jazz about one little thing we discussed. We're no longer in the heat of the moment. You can hear me and take that in now. Whereas before, I felt like we weren't even conversing, talking over each other, like a couple of school kids. So, you know, in decorum, following the idea of understanding the other person and asking questions to understand what the other person's point is, then you gain enough of a foundation to go into the conversation, which takes a lot of time, especially when, like Joel and I, we got into it with the definition of what God is. Stacy too. I mean, because I defend science, and people bring up, what about this spirituality and what about that spirituality? So anyway, there's a lot of minor misunderstanding which runs into bullying. So hello everybody.
Sam, me, Kayla, Tyra, whoever else.
Joel. You're up, Sam.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the topic of bullying. And I wanted to talk about three things which I think I'm suggesting that I look at, I look at these three data points.
What do you mean back to bullying? I was talking about manipulation of conversation. That's bullying. That's what I mean. A different kind of bullying. Sorry.
So the three data points that I'm about to share, to me, are ways that were handled regarding this topic. They're associated with bullying in some way. About 2 or 3 years ago, on Facebook, one of my elementary school acquaintances, and I won't say his name, contacted me and connected with me on Facebook and said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Yes, I remember him." And then he said, "I'm sorry for bullying you in school." And I was taken aback because I don't remember him bullying me in school. I remember a lot of other people bullying me in school, but I don't remember him bullying me in school. So I was curious about that, and I haven't really engaged in a full conversation about that to see what he meant by bullying. But anyway, that's just one little data point. But sometimes people think they're bullying you or bullying me, and I don't remember it as bullying. Okay, so that's data point number one. Throughout that elementary school period into junior high, we didn't have middle school in those days, we had junior high. I remember that if it weren't for this fellow named Mark and his friend Tony, see, I played violin, Mark played trumpet, Tony played, I think it was drums. And Tony was the biggest kid in school. He was like tallest guy, but super quiet, super gentle, not one of these super jock athletes, just tall, okay? And Mark, he was like the most confident, the best looking. He was like, wildly popular. He could talk to any girl he wanted to. He was like the popular kid in class, and he played trumpet. So for some reason, Mark took a liking to me, maybe because I was able to help him in math or a bunch of other classes or something like that. So he and Tony asked me to hang out with him. So the three of us pretty much did everything together. And I remember that if it weren't for that, junior high would have been a miserable experience for me. But because of that, I ended up being invited to their parties, to their friends' parties. And I remember there were some girls that knew Mark and knew Tony that would have parties, and then Mark and Tony would invite me to go along. And some of these girls were nice enough to actually, even offer to dance with me, because I never had the confidence to ask anybody to dance. So they asked me to dance. And I remember that was my very first experience of slow dancing. So that was kind of cool. But I'm just thinking, if it weren't for guys like Mark and Tony, my life in junior high would have been miserable. My third data point is in 2010 or 2011, I remember going to a football game in Stanford Stadium. This is Stanford versus Cal. I think I've told this story to a few of you before. And there was this guy who had obviously been drinking too much that was making his way closer and closer and closer to me, getting in people's faces and, talking shit, like sometimes drunk people do at football games. And he eventually came up to me and started just getting in my face, and I don't even remember what he was saying. He was just too close. His breath stunk, and he was just getting too close. And eventually, I managed to just, when he got too close, there's a particular move in Tai Chi called circle clouds, circle hands like clouds. It's basically, double circles. And what that is an application of leverage. So I got my left hand between his right elbow, and I got my right hand on his right wrist. And in so doing, essentially, it's almost a way of getting someone almost into a chicken wing, and without applying any leverage whatsoever, you have control over what that other person can do. So because he got too close, I just walked him about 10 yards away from where we were. I was with two other friends, and then went back to my friends, and he started coming back, and I just looked at him, and then he stopped and then walked away. So that was the closest I ever got to an actual physical fight. And what struck me was I didn't think about what I was doing. It just naturally happened. And I don't think I was in the wrong for guiding him away, because he was eventually going to do something worse. And I'm wondering whether I should have just waited for him to do something first. But he was already in my face for quite a long while before I did this. So does that count as invasion of private space? Or does that someone actually have to physically hit you first?
I think you did the right thing.
Curious about that. So anyway,
I think
those
you
are
did the right
three.
thing, Sam.
Thanks, Tyra. Anyway, those are 3 data points I just thought I'd share around this topic of bullying. Is that just like you, Tyra, that was an instance where I didn't just stay a victim. I just did something. And I also like the fact that Tony and Mark were seeing that I was being bullied and included me in their circle. And my life became, actually, kind of fun at times. Anyway, those 3 data points I thought I'd share over.
So I have a
missed a
question.
bit. I just want to know if you're still friends with Tony and Mark. I got interrupted, but I just.
I about 4 years ago, I found Tony. He's in Arizona now. And I asked him about Mark, and he doesn't know where Mark is. I don't know where Mark is. I've asked a couple other people from that school. None of them really know where he is. So yeah, I've wanted to find him, but I haven't been able to. Tony, on the other hand, is still a very nice guy. And so we don't frequently interact, but we sometimes like each other's Facebook posts.
Yeah, he sounds like somebody you'd want to stay in touch with.
Yeah.
So I want to ask the group. Oh, Kayla, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I was just going by the Jaswinder was next, then me, then you.
Oh,
Joe.
sorry. I wasn't, sorry. Go ahead.
Jaswinder.
What's important, Tyra, you're allowed to interrupt it. Points can be brought up in any order. We don't have to follow the protocol.
That's why I wanted, just to say, that's why I wanted Sam to stop it and start it again, because it felt like, for me, it gave me freedom, because now I don't have to follow the rules. I already said, okay, we're going to do it this way. Now we're just hanging out.
I think that's a message for you, Tyra. Jump in.
I want to ask the group, this, I was just talking about this little boy that I shamed publicly. I could probably find that kid on, on the internet and could make amends to him. Should I do that? I kind of my heart is telling me to make amends.
Get it off your chest. Do it.
What do you
now.
think? No? Not bring it up?
You
What do
might want to
think?
call his parents and see if it affected him in any way, and then maybe you and his parents could follow through. I think you want to, even though he's older, I think you still want to go back and do what you didn't do the right way. Call his parents.
Yeah.
The school's too late for the school, I assume.
Yeah.
I personally, if you really feel that you want to do it, I would do it without any names and just share the story and the apology without the names. And then you could private message and send it to him.
I would say exactly what Colin said. I would have to agree.
I didn't hear what Colin said, I'm sorry.
Call the parents, find the
Oh.
parents.
Yeah.
How old is this kid now?
It's like 17.
Yeah,
So-
17, I don't think you need to call his parents.
I don't
Yeah.
agree. I don't agree. I think 17-year-olds are still quite vulnerable.
Yeah, they're still kids.
Well, and this
And
is
they shouldn't be on
Idaho.
Facebook.
This is Idaho, and parents in Idaho are like, if you have a problem with a kid, you go punch him in the face. It's not like Los Angeles parenting. We're like, oh, let's talk it out. Let's in Idaho, it's like just go punch him. So I don't even know if the parents like.
I actually had a story for you too, Tyra, kind of
Yeah.
along the same lines as that.
Tell me.
And it just got me to thinking too, because my parents never stuck up for me.
Same here.
Like
Ever.
Even against my ex-husband was screaming at me from the top of his lungs. It was like 2 in the morning. There were kids on it was bad. And my parents were there, and I was praying to God that they would stop him because his anger was just off the hook, and they did not. And because of that, I will always, 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 always stick up for my kids and for what I think is right. And it's unfortunately kind of stuck with me in a very bad spot because, it's something I have to get over, but it's something that like I have a hard time with my parents with that. But understanding where they come from too, they were heavily, there was racism prevalent here, and there still is, so they're victims of that. But my son actually, Maxwell, the little one that you guys see, we had about like 3 kids out in the field. They were throwing rocks at him. They were throwing rocks at my son, and trust me, if I were to go, if I wanted to beat some kids up, that would have been the time, and so he comes tearful. Luckily, the dads were all playing basketball at the court over there by the school where the field was, and he comes crying, they're throwing rocks at me, and yes, there's 2 sides, but one side's the worse than the other. I guess Maxwell was doing something to them, and they decided to throw rocks. And so I scolded all 3 of those children in front of their parents, and I did not give a fuck. Like, you do not throw rocks. Your kid does not throw rocks at my kid. Period. You don't throw rocks at anyone. That will harm them, hurt them. I asked them, well, what did Maxwell do? And they just kind of clamped up because I think in their hearts of hearts, they knew he wasn't doing anything, wrong enough for them to do that. And at that point, I'm sure their parents were totally embarrassed, and one of them tried to intervene, and I'm like, but at the same time, it was that opportunity to stand up for what you really believe in.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that the parents won't ever talk to me again, or they're scared of me, but sometimes you just have to do what is right. And you have to take the lesser of the 2 evils.
Yeah.
Alex,
Good story.
had your hand up.
Whose turn? I'm sorry. Who's going?
I just saw Alex's hand, and I think I saw Sam's hand up.
Okay. And mine will be up after whoever is.
Oh, you can go. I've forgotten what I had.
What?
I've forgotten what I had to say, so you can go.
Sorry. Mine's just really short. And again, just focusing on from the point of view of the bully. I think a lot of time, like I said with myself, I think a lot of times we're not conscious of the fact that we're bullying. And when I was listening to that story, I was thinking of one time we had these raccoons, and the raccoons kept attacking our garbage cans at night. And my ex had this shotgun that he never used. I don't know why he had it, where it came from his old life or whatever. And he decided that he was going to go and and it was like a pellet gun or whatever. And I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say, actually. But what happened is he shot out the window at the raccoon, which, by the way, he was scared of. And he must have hit it a little bit and it like limped away, and he turned to me and he told me, you know, what had happened. And I looked at him and I said, he was just looking for food for his family.
Oh, wow.
And my ex's face just like dropped. And I know he felt terrible because he never really, because he's not a bad person. And he never really thought about that. And after that, we spent a lot of money every time we had raccoons, getting trappers come out and trap them and take them away to the country. But I just want to share that because I think that on the other side of it, a lot of bullying begins with covering up somebody's pain. And I don't want bullies to be lost in this process either, especially when I think about young kids and school shootings and things like that. You know, there's a lot of pain out there. There's a lot of trauma out there. And, you know, we all experience it to some degree. And I think that it would probably be helpful if, as angry as we are, we at least try to, not that we allow something to happen when it's wrong, but at least to recognize that, you know, there are parts of ourselves there, we're, you know, and have a little bit more compassion for each other.
Unless you're throwing rocks at my son.
But absolutely. No. And I don't know how old they were, but again, even in that case, I would want, like, you know, as a teacher, I would want to know, you know, like, why were you throwing? How do you think it would feel? That's what, okay. So the one thing that I recognize that I really am grateful to my mother for, she might've done a little bit too much, but she always said, put yourself in someone else's shoes. It was always, how would this make you feel? How would that make you feel? Maybe a little bit too much because I wound up worrying more about how other people would feel than how I would feel. But there is something in that because I recognize now that some people don't have a natural sense of empathy. It can be developed, but some people just, I believe, come in with more of it and some people come in with less of it. And the goal should be, I think that it, you know, if we're trying to create a better way of doing things, we should keep in mind, how do we increase empathy?
I can speak to that whole empathy part of the puzzle, and understanding your bullies. So my dad was a really angry, verbally abusive alcoholic. And I was an only child. So, you know, I developed these, you know, coping skills like avoid, go out in the forest instead of being in the house. And I was really terrified of my dad. And it wasn't until I turned 45 and I found out that I had a brother. Never knew I had a brother. And my brother was 6 months younger than me. And he found me on the internet, and my brother had been given up for adoption. And it was during the Vietnam War. My dad had an affair with a very young girl while my mother was pregnant with me. And then that young girl got pregnant, and my dad fled the scene like a criminal and never stepped up and kept that secret his whole life. And I realized that once my brother found me, it's like, wow, my dad has been living with this for all these years. And I never told my dad that my brother had found me because I knew my dad would attack my brother and say, you know, get out. I don't know who you are. But what it did, it gave me a complete understanding of my dad's behavior that I never had before. His anger was turned inward. He was so ashamed of himself for what he had done and for, you know, basically abandoning this boy, this baby, and then, you know, living this lie. And I can't imagine how he must have felt when, you know, these shows come out where long lost siblings are reunited. He died 2 years after my brother found me. But I realized why he was so angry at me. You know, he was lashing out at me because he abandoned this baby, you know. And so it gave me a lot of empathy for my father. Now, do I respect his choices? No. Did my heart ever feel safe with him? Never. And I protected my brother from him. And I said, you know what? You're lucky this man didn't raise you. That's why you're so confident. And my brother is amazing. We're like twins. We talk alike. We walk alike. We look alike. We even are the same kind of artists. We're illustrative artists. And we take the same kind of photographs. And so we're very, very, very alike. And that's the greatest gift my father ever gave to me, was my brother. And I just thank the gods that he found me, you know, and that he wanted to know me. He followed me for years on the internet, just looking at my face, trying to decide if I was somebody that would be open to him in my life. And I told him, I'm like, you hit the jackpot. You know, I'm so excited to have a baby brother who's 6 months younger, and he's such a doll. You know, he's everything my dad wasn't. So I get to kind of look at him and get something good out of my dad. But yeah, the empathy was really good. Hold on, my ex-husband's calling.
What's burning in my mind right now is I'm just wondering whether Tyra ever met her brother's mother.
Well, he found his mother before he found me, and she never married. She never had children. She never had a relationship, and she became a shut-in. And she would not allow him to come to Montana to meet her because he thought it was because she felt ashamed because she became morbidly obese. So he got on the plane when she was dying and got there too late. He didn't get to meet her. But hearing her stories about my father, it was really chilling, you know, and my brother found photographs of my father when he went through her stuff, because she never told anybody. She never told a single soul she had a child. So yeah, her life was really derailed by that. She was only 18 years old. And so really sad what happened to her. But she did get to have a relationship with her beautiful son, and he has identical twin daughters. So she got to send presents to her granddaughters, but she kept it a secret. It wasn't until she died that David got to go meet that side of his family. So yeah, it affected a lot of lives.
You know, that
And he
the
was
shame
angry.
is that shame is another good topic to explore, because I know Alex knows from, you know, the rooms and stuff, so many people are carrying shame.
Well,
And
secrets, yeah.
secrets, shame, and it does cause people to behave differently than if they weren't carrying that around, you know, because they're
Yep.
protecting that.
You're only as sick as your secrets. And yeah, my dad had a big one. And who knows? I mean, my brother and I are on 23andMe, and we're like, oh my God, are there more of us? And I always say to him, I'm like, we're not going to like them like we like each other, you know, because we call each other twins, you know, because we feel like we're twins. Like you're my favorite. So, yeah.
I wanted to relieve Kyla's concern about me being tired because it's late at night here. But I get up late, so when I have a Zoom session on the next day, I get up late. I call it the next day because it's 1 o'clock in the morning when a Zoom session starts.
You're a trooper, Alex, because that messes with your circadian rhythm. So.
For half the week.
Yeah. I fix it with a good session of sleep during the day. I go to sleep at 4 o'clock in the morning and wake up about 12 o'clock the next day. So I lose a lot of sunlight too. So that's a concern, because sunlight is brilliant as long as you're careful. Oh, well.
Alex, do you see this? Do you know what that is?
That looks like,
Those are the
looks like,
hands of the Lorax.
I thought they looked like the feet of a chicken.
I'm working on the Lorax, and here he's coming so far. It's gonna be really cute.
I think Colin is calling out Joel.
Yes, he is. On the bullying, one thing I noticed from all of you is you keep saying, these horrible people exist, they need to change. But those horrible people do exist all over the world, and we can't change that. And the thing they keep changing is they keep making you stronger and keep making you see things in a different way that you didn't see before. Do we really want to get rid of these arseholes? Because they're actually kind of a very useful lesson to anyone who is paying attention. The thing I keep seeing is existence is always going to make arseholes, because that's the nature of interaction. When someone is jealous of someone else, they're going to be an arsehole. When someone doesn't like someone else, they're going to be an arsehole. So there's always going to be arseholes, because like our nature, how we are talking together like this, how we can discuss our emotions, that annoys certain people. Just that we can do that and that we can be open and honest about our feelings, that really irritates and annoys people. And how do they react when that happens? They attack us. Whether it's from a sense of ignorance or a sense of being made to feel inadequate, I don't know. But I do know that we're all getting stronger from these interactions. Sometimes when we let the interactions make us weaker, it is because of how we are seeing it in our mind. Like when I was younger, there was a lot of things I used to fear. And it was only when I let go of the fear years later that I looked back on the fear and realized it was all in my mind, that it was me that abstracted it in a lot of situations. And whilst there might have been some minor danger, the real level of fear I had wasn't rational. It was too much, and it was blocking me from seeing what was really going on. To speak on what Colin's talking about in the books, science has made a lot of claims that aren't true. They're dogmatic. They've never been proven, like materialism. In fact, if you go on materialism, science keeps proving the material we think is there isn't there, and that it's functions of something else operating, and that keeps going down and down and down and down and down. So there's a great many dogmas in science that are just like a religion. And when you look at atheists and how they react when science is questioned, they show the exact same behaviors as the religious people. They don't go to the science. They attack you for attacking science. They claim science is the all-knowing, but it's not. And it keeps proving its own knowledge wrong day by day, because we learn how the functions work. There used to be that science was the method. But even that's been lost properly now. Peer review's nonsense. It's the biggest nonsense on the face of the planet. That we can agree upon wrong things is mental. How did some sciences become all about abstraction and emotion without understanding first how the abstractions happen and what is truly causing the emotionality? I'm done.
I just wanted to put my tuppence worth in there, Joel. Thanks for that explanation. First thing I would like to say emphatically, although it may not appear so empirically, is there are no assholes. There are no bad people. There are no good people. What we're looking at is acceptable behavior and the situations in which that behavior is acceptable. Secondly, this is the crunch of the matter. Human race, it may not be one. I would concede that there may be some speciation ongoing. I would request, Colin, that if you would not put things in the chat and questions to me while I'm in a flow of some sort of flow of thought pattern. It may have taken me years to formulate. And memory being what it is, it's fragile, it can be lost so quickly. So here's a thing that a question that I've been posing in several ways, and I'll pose it in a slightly different way, but it's essentially the same question. There are two teams on the football field. Doesn't matter what kind of football, whether it's the English, European type or the American type, or baseball or whatever. There are two teams. Which one is the asshole? How do you test whatever phenomena we are putting forward? Whether we assume there is a God or not, or whether we use an euphemism and say, well, ask the universe. As a great philosopher once said, some call him this and some call him that. At the end, it is the same phenomena. Oh, Alex, it doesn't mean if I ask Colin to not write things in the chat that you can take over his From Colin, sorry, I would miss the opportunity here with your GISLab. Anyway, so this is one of the things we do not appreciate. We are a species where there is no other species to test us, so we test against each other for whatever silly reason. And the other thing I would like to put in here is that the requirements for propagation, to self-propagate, to reproduce, is very closely related. It is, in fact, that the resources have to be there for propagation. And so far, we have not been mature enough to realize that we can control the situation where we don't have to fight over the resources. But we continue to do so. It is a habit we have formed that we are finding extremely difficult to come out of because we're locked in. I forget to put in a comma often. Thanks, Alex. By the way, sure if you're aware, but punctuation is dead. We don't bother with it anymore. There are lots of people who complain that we don't bother with it because it's a bad habit that they've gotten into.
I think we only need punctuation. I think we should just talk with periods, commas, semicolons, no words.
You've been watching that musical chappie, haven't you? The one who took, I forget his name, he's very old, he's older than me. Oh, Borgia.
No, I have no idea.
Oh, you should listen to his talk on talking with or without punctuation.
Victor Borgia is hilarious. Yes.
He is. You must dig that up on YouTube. Please do.
Yeah,
So,
post the link. It sounds good.
To cut this very short, if you're able to step back out of the human race, pretend you are not in the human race or the human species, and look at it from what we're doing, what comes out of it, the empirical evidence. What is the good that's coming out of it? And forget the bad. Because there is no bad. That is a connotation we give the situation. The Germans, I'm just going to end with this one. The Germans, over a period of a couple of 100 years or more, were not happy with the English. The French, for a period of about 500 years and more, and continuing, are not happy with the English. And that goes for other European, Western European countries. The English is a hornet's nest that's invaded nearly well over 3/4 of the countries of the world. So there's nobody out there who's actually at all happy with the English. And the English, they're withdrawing and they don't want anybody coming here now. I'm complete.
Go ahead, Sam.
I just realized when I think Tyra and others were talking about kids and perpetuating cycles of bullying and getting back to apologizing to the kid. It struck me this week that my son is 28. And it also struck me that he's the age my dad was when my dad had me. My son is as old as my dad was when I was born. So these cycles, man, they happen so fast. It just seems like yesterday that he was like tiny, you know, and cute. And so this whole cycle brings up this thought I had in my mind that I've expressed a few times, which is I really hate it, but death works. Death as a cycle works. The old must make way for the new, for learning, for evolution, for things to happen. I don't like it, I don't like the idea of death in some way. I haven't really completely come to grips with it. Although I'm much calmer now than I was 20 years ago, but I'm still not entirely there. One other point I want to come back to was Colin's point about being asked to define science. I actually think that that's actually a very good question. You can't assume that all of us have the same definition of any term when we're involved in any conversation. There's the dictionary term, and not everybody even understands the dictionary term. And oh, by the way, there's lots of dictionaries. And oh, by the way, there's lots of different schools teaching the same word. So asking the question, what does science mean to you, is a very valid question. And I think it's not necessarily one that should be assumed and dismissed. And in fact, that very notion of clarifying what we mean by certain terms and phrases is the fundamental notion behind Dictopedia, is that it's an opportunity to understand where our differences are early so that they don't have larger negative ramifications later. That's a bigger idea, okay? Anyway, I'll tell another story about Nick if we have more time later on, but it's not really about bullying. Over.
I just want to jump in and say one sentence real quick, just to add to what Jaswinder's saying. I think, like, I listen to a lot of conversations from, people, systems point of view thinking. And one thing that I think gets overlooked is that everything, as far as I know, everything in nature has a mirror opposite, a complete opposite. And it's there for a reason. And
I apologize, except one thing. All other things have an opposite. All yours.
Except for the center. Except for the center. Except for the point of origin. Except for the point of origin.
You're talking in dichotomies.
There's no dichotomy.
It's all,
The thing-
my point is that it's all part of the whole. That's all I want to say. It's all part of the whole.
Yeah.
Existence is the opposite of the what do they call that place? The point, the termination point, the singularity. Existence is the opposite, it's mirror of that singularity. So that's why black holes are the gateways into other universes.
When there are black holes, there are also white holes. I would continue if I were you, Stacey. Otherwise, it's just going to bog down because it's a very difficult thing to understand.
But the reason I won't continue or I wouldn't continue is I mean, I just want to like leave that and then everybody could take it in their own way with whatever.
Yep.
Not for here, because there's no reason for it. Like I know Colin's burning to say why what I said was wrong. I feel that.
I'm not.
And what I would say is sometimes it's okay to just let something sit, because I'm not saying anything beyond that one point that I actually think we could agree on. And so why not just let that sit for a minute?
Okay.
Colin?
You're brave, Stacey. No.
Yes, I am.
I just think you're talking in generalities from how you feel, and that's valid how you feel.
Well, wait a minute, but how, it's not how I feel. Give me an example.
You feel for a positive, there's an opposite, or a negative, there's a positive, or whatever, for everything.
No, let's just look at nature. Wait a minute. I made a point about nature. Hold on a second. I made a point. Let's stay scientific here. I made a point about nature. Tell me what in nature doesn't have, what doesn't have an opposite? Because you're saying, you know, I'm saying
I don't even know what you mean by that.
So then how could you disagree with it if you don't even know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying. It sounds like how you feel.
But it sounds like that to you,
Right.
Because as you just said, you don't understand what I'm saying.
I don't understand in nature that there's that, like, it's like a doppelganger, or what do they say? There's multiple universes, so there's another copy of you somewhere
How
else.
does the cell, I'm not really versed in science, so somebody would have to help me out, but just my basic knowledge, don't cells keep dividing into mirror images of themselves? Somebody's got to help me. I'm not a science person.
Yeah, that's not opposite, and I'm not here to tear you down. You could mean something else, and we could dig into what you mean and get into the nuance of it, and I'm sure you have a point of some kind. But
I don't feel being torn down. Let me clarify. I don't feel like you're tearing me down. I'm just saying if you want to talk scientifically in facts.
Stacey.
Nuance. I'm talking about breaking down the nuance, not you.
You don't have to defend anything. You have made a point.
That's right.
I'm not defending, I'm clarifying.
I wanted to talk about Joel and Sam.
Everything has an equal and opposite.
Thank you. Okay.
If it wasn't so, there would be no existence.
So I'm asking Colin to give me an example, a concrete example of where that's not so. Because he's saying it's about feelings. So I want a concrete example of where that's not so.
Even feelings have opposites.
Whatever.
In a continuum of any kind that's not a dichotomy. How's that?
Can I jump in here? There's a tendency to think in binary terms, which has a negative impact on the issue, because between hot and cold, there's a whole range of temperatures.
Right.
Right. So when you have a mirror image of something in nature, there's a whole range of things in between those two images that represent the whole of nature. Over.
That's a range, not a mirror.
So if we could use the scientific term in that case, there is a potential difference. And however slight that potential difference is, it still exists as an opposite.
Forces, yes.
Except at the point where the singularity originates. Then there is nothing. And that has no other comparable opposite.
Science speculates the singularity. We don't know for sure.
Well, Colin, you don't know for sure. That's your beef. That's your interpretation. You
Well,
cannot
go
lay
get,
that
go get your Nobel Prize. That's where the
you
sarcasm.
cannot lay that interpretation on everybody else.
Go get your Nobel Prize, buddy.
No, but Colin, if you
No,
want to do that, give one
that's
example. Let's follow the
sheer
rules.
sarcasm of a kind that's not acceptable, is that you are doing exactly what you don't want others to do to you.
No, I give you 3 chances. That's all I can give you. Anyway, I wasn't to talk about Stacy, and I'm not my intention. Sorry, Stacy. My comment was about the science with Joel and Sam. The reason why I take offense of being asked to define what was science, because it was in the scope of the conversation that we have. If the people here do not know what grade 6 science is, it's not for me to clear that up for you, first of all.
It is if you make assumptions about what it is, Colin.
Well, you got a point. You got a point, but the point is, science is a method. Okay, that should, the scientific method, right? So.
Yeah, but see, you can clearly see that Joel disagrees.
Well, no, I don't think Joel disagrees. I think we speak different terms. We have to separate the terms. He's saying, from what I heard, that science has made mistakes, science makes claims that aren't true, and science is corrupted. All those things I agree with. But science itself is not. It's the human manipulation of it, right? It's the human ignorance that does that. It's the human hubris and the human bullying and the human greed that does that. It's not science. Science just, is something that can help you predict if you can reproduce results that you've hypothesized. Not finding out coming up with the conclusion. I'll tell you what it's not. It's easier to say what science is not, and that's what I said last time. Science is not having a conclusion and then trying to fit all the data to that conclusion. It's to have a hypothesis and let the data go where it can. Now, as humans, Joel's pointing out, well, they screw it up a lot when they're, so maybe they do. But the point that I mean about science is that it will correct itself. If there is a situation where material world as we know it is not actually real, like, you could say that could be similar to a problem a few hundred years ago where they thought that the sun was, or the earth was the center of the universe, and then they got into heliocentricity, right? So the deal is that science corrects itself, and hopefully the corruption will get exposed. But no, science helps you predict things. That's why when they fly an airplane, they have a certain level of confidence that it will fly, because they brought in all of the things that they need to do to hold the constraints to say within a certain level of confidence, this plane will fly. But if you get an air pocket or there's ice buildup and all these other things, they say, oh, well, it'll fly as long as there's not ice buildup. So they learn and they fix it. So I see Sam's hand up. So I don't want to say that it's not worth defining science. What I'm saying is it should have been done long before you got here. And if Sam's saying, well, some people don't know or whatever, then I leave that for an exercise for them because I'm not a scientist. But I do believe in the scientific method. And if not corrupted, we'll probably give you some data to think about. And that's kind of what it is. So, and if it's, many scientists have, well, I wouldn't say many, but I've heard lots of stories about science and peer reviews. There's a really good example of people showing how corrupt the peer review process is. So I agree with that too. There's a lot of problems with science, but these are wicked problems of humans, not of science. It's how we manipulate science. So, and Jazz and Alex, I don't know which one, they're trying to tell me that science is philosophy. I think science might have come out of philosophy. At one point in time, science, where philosophy was the only pseudoscience, right? As religion, somebody's bowling in the sky. Well, that's the science. As far as they know, someone's bowling in the sky when they hear thunder. Well, we learned that Zeus is not throwing that stuff around. But, and a great point, anything that we don't understand looks like magic. So Stacy's comment about everything has an opposite. If she could pull that off in front of my eyes, I would feel she's magic. Like, I don't even know what she means. You can set up systems that react opposite. Forces are have equal and opposite reactions, so that, you know, as much when you sit on your chair pushes back on you as much as you're pushing on your chair, or else you'd be floating around in the z-axis, right? So, you know, there are examples of equal and opposite, but not everything has an opposite. Like, do I have an opposite? Like, what the hell does that mean? So anyway, I'll leave it there. I don't want to pick apart what Stacy's saying, because she may have a really great point under there somewhere, but I don't understand where she's going with it. And
Well, the first objection there is, if you take a general conversation and then you bring it down to the personal, that goes down to your 10, 12 rules. Oh, sorry, I didn't know if people were waiting.
Yeah, I don't think I violated any of those rules, and if I did, please tell me why.
I'm just telling you did. Now you're arguing about it.
No,
But this is what's wrong with you. I'm not going to talk to you anymore.
I wasn't getting personal and then I had a hominem with Stacy. I was saying I didn't understand her.
I will explain. Okay? Lots of people do this without realizing it. If you're making a general point, okay? You made a general point, which is great. Then you said, do I, in other words, Colin, does Colin have an opposite? Now, if you would have started with saying, I'm going to talk about Colin, that would have been a personal thing. So you can't take a generalization and bring it down to the personal. When you're talking about thousands and millions and billions of people, you don't suddenly bring it down to one person. It's like saying,
does an orange have an opposite? Okay.
It's like saying, does an orange have an opposite? Now, that's not what we're talking about when we talk about opposites in the scientific sense, is it?
I don't know. She said everything.
Okay. So when you have something we call bitter, there is something we call sweet. When you have something we call hot, we have something we call cold. When you have something, so we're talking about the scientific phenomena that builds everything.
It tries to explain physical phenomenon.
There you are. So you don't take that and you make something out of it. For example, a bronze statue and say, well, look, I made something unique. It doesn't have an opposite.
I don't think we're in the same conversation again, defining terms.
I know we're not in the same conversation.
Is Sam still there? I'm curious to hear what he had to say. He had his hand up when I was halfway through.
Can I just jump in for a second? I'm in the middle of cooking eggs. I don't want to burn something, but I just want to be clear. So Colin, I really do believe in the scientific method. My understanding of that is first you come up with a hypothesis. So my hypothesis is based on the way I know cells divide, the very smallest, whatever, that it seems to be showing me in nature that there is an equal and opposite something. That's all. So then I said to you, if you don't think, do you have an example of where that's not the case? Because I can't design my experiment. Hold on a second. I know what my hypothesis is. I just told you. I can't design my experiment until I see what you think might be the outlier to what I said. So it's not that I'm not taking a scientific approach, you're just not recognizing that.
I proposed to Jazz that when you said everything and you also said opposite, and I said, well, then that includes an orange. So you have to be more specific.
No,
I don't want.
Wait, can I jump in here? Since this is a free for all right now, okay? I think when Stacy made a point, rather than appreciating the primary message that she was trying to deliver,
right?
Your reaction went immediately to a very, I would say, logically simple and trivial statement, which is not everything, okay? And that misses the opportunity to hear the message that Stacy was trying to deliver, and you just wanted to be, in a sense, logically correct in a way that was not addressing the main point that Stacy was trying to make. And I think that's what derailed the conversation, because you didn't have the, I would say, generosity to first understand the message that Stacy was trying to deliver.
Why do you think I asked her? I don't understand what you're saying. I didn't.
Why not give it some time to sink in first rather than immediately contradict?
Because there's nothing to sink in. There's no.
See, again, you're doing that to me.
Well,
You're
I'm
doing
just
it to
saying.
me.
I'm just saying. If it doesn't make any sense, it
You're
doesn't make.
immediately responding
Of course.
with the corner case that makes the other person wrong,
Well,
rather than saying,
Sam, instead of berating me, why don't
could I possibly be deriving from this, instead of trying to overtalk someone?
instead of
That's what
berating
I
me,
see
why
you
don't you
doing a lot,
enlighten me? Why don't you
Is
enlighten
that
me?
you
instead of
don't
berating me?
actually listen to
I
what
did.
people are trying to say. Look, you're trying to overtalk me this entire time.
Right, because you're
And
berating
you
me.
are not actually trying to assimilate what is actually being said. You did this to Stacy. I tried to give you my observation of what's going on.
Not your
talking over
explanation of
me.
what she said, which
So
is what
now
we need.
I'm going to depart because it's clear that you're not listening.
Okay, depart. But if you want to be a gentleman about it, then you would explain what Stacy might have meant to you when I don't understand. Not tell me that because I don't understand, I don't get to say I don't understand.
So if you were being a gentleman, you would actually give it some resonance before immediately striking back.
There's no handlebars to think about.
You're not looking for the handlebars.
I totally am, and I resent that.
No, you're not.
Well, I think you're wrong. In fact, I even ruminated to why, because she asked for some corner cases. So I said, well, I don't know. It's like you're saying everything has an opposite. So if I'm getting logical, that's one thing. But when I'm talking about an orange, you know, like she's talking about things that divide. So
you're getting lost in words.
So I can think about, she says that, you know, I know that's the whole point, Sam. So I'm confused. Maybe I should just say, okay, well, everything has an opposite. There you go. Good lesson for me. That makes no sense. You don't have to tell me, Alex, that I don't understand when I already admitted I don't understand. So Stacy, you know, if you want to continue that conversation, I'm not trying to ad hominem or belittle you. I'm saying I truly don't understand.
I know. I think what might be happening is that you're taking one small thing of what I say and you're jumping all the way to the other end as if I'm saying that's 100% sure. All I'm saying is, what about if we started with the small part of what I just said? My hypothesis is, in nature, since I see in nature that everything has an opposite, maybe there's something to it as it expands to the rest of whatever the world turns out to be. That could be our emotions, that could be anything. I'm not going that far to say, I know this is fact. I'm not doing that at all. I'm just giving you some insight as to where I'm starting at. And it's a point that I think we could, even you, be able to start at, because it is part of the scientific method, which is proposing a hypothesis.
It sounds good to me. And I said that I could start to get handle grips if you use the word continuum instead of opposite.
But can you do that
there
if
are
I change
theoretical
nothing?
opposites.
Here's the trick. This is where growth happens. Can you do that if I don't change? If I stay exactly as I am, can you still figure out a way to move forward?
Yeah, but I won't understand what you've said. I just basically throw it into the I don't understand pile.
Or you could do it, you could follow my lead and I said to you, can you give me one example where that doesn't happen?
Example of something in nature that doesn't have an opposite.
Correct.
That would be an orange.
Within that orange, again, I don't have the scientific background, but how does that seed start? Like, I don't know. I'm guessing that it follows a certain pattern. I want someone to fill that in.
It sounds like you're talking about evolution to me.
Well, that's a part of it. Isn't that a part of our world around us?
And I don't know if death would be an opposite to evolution or a continuum of a different evolution. I don't know.
I didn't say an opposite. That's a part. Death is death not an opposite to life?
Well, I don't know. It depends who you ask. I have a really, really hard time finding any real dichotomy at all. Like even off and on, an electrical switch has analog manipulation.
All right, but it's a stage. If nothing else, it's a reset point. So whatever happens after you die, I'm not arguing that, but it seems to be a reset point where it comes back to a new beginning, new, now I'm getting philosophical, but I'm trying to start with the science.
I'm trying to think of a way to actively listen.
Alex, go ahead. You're muted.
I'm leaving the meeting. I'm going to bed. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Sleep well.
Sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
I'm just off camera so I could chomp down.
What are you eating, dear?
Just an egg and toast.
Oh, that sounds good. Sunny side up?
Yes, that's why I'm off camera. It's very messy.
Unless Joel had something to say, I did have a question for Jazz, since we're in the after. You posted something about philosophy in the chat, and I was talking with Alex in the chat as well about, he made a list of things that science was, and one was philosophy and another was religion. So I made the point that philosophy, was the grandparent of sciences, but philosophy itself is I don't think it's classified as a science. It's what happens before you can make a science. Once they start to answer those hypotheses that they come up with in philosophy, they go into a science and say, okay, well, you people in physics take care of it. And physics and philosophy now have started to actually bicker a bit in some of the debates. And I don't know, I have no opinion on that. I think philosophy is very valuable. Some scientists think that it's a waste of time now. I don't agree with that. But so science is a child of philosophy, not philosophy. A second thing, because, philosophy is, a second thing is that religion is definitely not science, because the whole method of science is, Stacy, pretty opposite to the scientific method, because religion comes kicking and screaming to the things that are found in science. And maybe I'm wrong, but I would suspect that religion follows, and I don't want to say true religion, but strict religion, fundamentalist religion, whatever. It's a dogma. It does not change when it finds out new things until it is forced, kicking and screaming. So I won't go any further than that. We have a lot of learning to do. We're still pretty primitive.
I just want to say that from where I'm sitting, science and philosophy are two different ways of questioning what's around. And what I would say about science, or I'd ask a question, do you think that scientists are always very good at following the scientific method without bias? Because I don't.
I did mention that the thing that corrupts science is humans.
Well, but I think that's an important point, because
it is, but over time,
scientific method is a process. But here's the difference: scientific method is a method. How well somebody uses that method is a different story. At least that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that. And I also think that our own ignorance, like Joel's hitting on a whole new context when he says, Newtonian physics isn't what it seems once you get to the quantum. But then you get people who get into philosophy with the quantum, like Deepak Chopra, and it almost makes me want to hurl. But anyway.
I just want to say one more thing, because I always have, whenever we're getting into these conversations, I always have this vision of the bell curve. And I always imagine if you were to like cut off half the screen and ask the person to say, where will the next point be? If you don't know what's coming on the other side, you don't know what direction it's going in.
Yeah, that's why you do test and retest.
But again, if you're in the box, you don't know what's outside the box.
That would be the supernatural.
No.
Well,
time for me to interject now.
Yeah, but
no, you've had your say.
Okay,
It's
let
my
Joel-
turn.
how about
Fine. You've
mathematics?
asked me
I wanna
to
hear you
correct
talk
my
about
voice
that.
up.
Come on,
All
mathematics.
right. As I've said before, much of religion has been corrupted by the people. That's most of modern religions today were corrupted by the bishops and everyone else who decided to apply their emotionality and their corrupt ideas and add it to what was already there. But when you pay attention to the religions in general, when you learn of the lessons they are teaching, most of them are philosophy or psychology, if you was to use the scientific word for the same process. They watched people acting and behaving and came up and wrote these lessons for us to learn from. Within that, there has always been what modern day has lied about endlessly. We have proven that what was it called now, where you make gold supposedly, I can't remember the word, the old version,
Alchemy?
Yeah, alchemy. Most of alchemy, we've gone back and looking over all the ancient records, and what did we find when we put them through the computer systems? Oh, they're all actually fully scientific equations describing exactly the process we use today. These people saw the body of existence as God. They were studying its functionality in totality and seeing that functionality as being part of God. So you keep going to the science and saying they see it this way, they see it that way, but so did the religions. And it was academia and the Western perspective looking at the more modern perspectives of the religion that got the complete wrong idea. They looked at something and went, oh, it's woo-woo. But as I just said, getting down to the crux of it, when you look at like Buddhism, it's all psychology, understanding how people interact with each other, seeing how their emotions work, working out how their mind works. These are all things that got distorted by our culture going, no, they're stupid. They believe in woo-woo. There's spirits. What are spirits? Well, when you go to the ancient cultures, they saw life as flow. Their idea of spirits were life forms. What did we find out when we've gone into science and studied what makes us sick? Life forms, bacteria, viruses, these are all spirits. When you go to smudging actually is of various flowers, garlic, rosemary, thyme, lemon balm. What do we find when we study the effects of smudging on the area? Lemon balm is highly reactive to insects. It actually drives them out of the area. Various different other smokes kill bacteria and viruses in the air. So all of these things are very scientific in their understanding. It's the perspective from another culture, looking at another culture's completely different way of abstracting the world. So you say that science is very methodical, but at the same time, they've already got a fixed perspective. It is material. It went this way. Evolution. It happened exactly how we imagine it. We've come up with evolutionary psychology. And if you know the first thing about how physics works, you listen to what they say and they're going, oh yeah, well, this happened because we're the better humans. Obviously, of course, it's going to make us evolve to this state because we're the better ones. But when you look at the spectrum of humanity in the sense of how they act, think and behave, like the say red for the aggressive and purple for the intelligent and less aggressive, we notice that the red spectrum with aggression can always eliminate the purple spectrum who are less aggressive, because being in society, being social, makes you collect, makes you less aggressive. But being more out of that, you're more willing to look at them and just get jealous. Imagine how many cultures have been destroyed by jealous cultures who thought they were the betters, and then they just destroyed everything. You look at India. When the British went to India, the British pillaged one of the wealthiest countries in the world. They destroyed thousands of years worth of history out of arrogance because they knew better. They were the enlightened Western cultures. But the reality was they were
disagree with what I said.
Very blind.
Sorry to cut you off, but where does that disagree with anything I said? Maybe you're not talking about my point, but it seemed like you were coming in to make a counterpoint, and I'm waiting for it.
The counterpoint, Colin, is science from the Western perspective has got a damn sight wrong, and a lot in a religious context, in exactly the same way as the religions were formulated. There's very little difference. The only difference today, we have technology.
Yeah.
But in the old days,
better tools.
Technology makes up for tools you don't have.
Right.
How much of evolution has created possibilities outside of the average and normal spectrum of human perception that science refuses to listen to, because there isn't enough of the numbers for them to go, okay, we'll put some money into that. They don't do it. Because science has gone, this doesn't exist. We say the physics is this doesn't exist, so we're not going to research it.
You're definitely confusing the effects of people using science to the science itself. Just like when it comes to a religion, if somebody's got some bad ideas that they, from the bad parts of the book, you said there's a lot of good parts in there, but if they got some ideas from the bad parts of the book, right, then that's not really to be respected.
Let's put this another way then. Science is an attempt to tell you how existence works. From that science, we have now created edicts to tell people how they can live their life. You can't smoke in this area. You mustn't do this. You mustn't do that. We will fine you for doing this. We will fine you for controlling your own life, your own destiny.
Well, that's government.
They created those edicts from the science. Now, religion has done exactly the same thing.
No, you were talking about government, not science. That was government you just mentioned, not science.
Where did the knowledge come from? Who are the people doing the acts?
Interpretation. Same thing like the Bible. You get two different people, somebody who wants, feels entitled, somebody else who feels very humble. They read the Bible. You're going to find different things growing in their garden.
Who is the government medical professional?
The government's the one who
medical professional with the academic Western scientific perspective.
You're talking about edicts. So maybe you didn't use the right example. So I don't want to nitpick as Sam accused me of.
Smoking.
Yeah, smoking.
You mustn't smoke. It's bad for you. How dare you smoke? How dare you choose how your own health shall be? We will tax and fine you. We will tell you where you can and can't do this act. This is based upon the science. This is an edict that has come from saying, this is how existence is working. We're now going to tell you that you have to follow what we say. That's the same as the religions. They've gone, we've studied and learned of this relationship. We think that relationship is bad. You're not allowed to do it.
You're not allowed to affect other people with it. That's one thing. Another thing is that they're putting an insurance number on it because it's a dangerous activity. Like if you can go skydiving, but your insurance, you might not be covered in insurance if you die, and your kids might not get any inheritance because we're not covering you if you go jumping out of a plane. So we can do what we want. It's just at what level do they say that the risk of harm to you or other people is too much? Now, if you're saying the government doesn't allow us to, has no right to tell us what's harmful, then that's another discussion about politics and being, what do they call the guy who says that they have the right to do everything and they don't have any responsibility for anybody else unless they want to? It's called a liberal, not liberal, but libertarian. Yeah, like I don't want to pay for the hospitals. I'm not responsible for any social systems. In fact, I just want to go this way. Just try to stop me. That's that's a libertarian. So I don't have any problem really with what you're saying. I think we're talking about the bad effects of people making bad decisions for whatever reason. Science itself is set up as a method that will self-correct over time if you keep looking and hammering away at it. If people don't want to look at a certain avenue, I think I've heard that before, like, oh, you're not listening to our alternative medicines. Well, I don't know. I can't say any of those things. In fact, I don't know is probably my 92% answer. And people who say they do know kind of make me leery of maybe they're more confident than they should be. And please explain to me why you're so confident. Like, for example, why there's opposites. Sorry, Stacy.
That's okay. If I could just switch to a different part of the elephant for a minute, because Colin, you mentioned, nature does correct itself. Science, or you're calling it science. I'm going to change the word a little. Nature does correct itself, but do people?
The right governance around it.
But do people? Well, okay. I just want to point out that in everything that's being talked about, from whether we're talking about religion having been corrupted or science being corrupted, I just want to point out that there's a really large percentage of men in power and a lack of women in those spaces. And I think that there's something that needs to be looked at there, especially when it comes to the power dynamics and how these sorts of corruptions are allowed to happen. And, before we got on this call, Sam, we recorded, it was me and Tyra, just me and Kayla, just talking about, what the next 2 hours were going to be. And I made I laughed because the way Kayla and I just did it was such a different kind of easy meshing of ideas. And that's something that women, not all women, that's not what I'm saying, but by nature, we tend to be better at seeing many different perspectives because we have to see different perspectives from the different members of our family. And where all these corruptions, like if I were to look at the church, women were silenced, nuns were silenced, people were silenced. If we're going to allow a power dynamic to flourish, we're going to have corruption. And that's in science too. If money and the power behind that is going to be how we determine who has the status or power or whatever the means be, we're going to have corruption. So I just wanted to highlight that because whoever the people are, whatever their gender is, isn't really what matters, but their ability to, and again, this goes to why we did this whole thing on empathy. There are just certain types of people that don't always make it to the top of the power base, whatever that is. And somehow we need to find a way to empower people so that the power can't be concentrated with a few. If it's going to be concentrated with a few, we're going to kill each other. We're going to kill ourselves off. So yes, science will correct it by wiping us all out. So we could go that way.
No, I think that last statement was a little far. I guess earlier I was thinking as a rebuttal to, or as a point, should we get rid of democracy because of Donald Trump? Because he doesn't know how to do it, so he's corrupted.
Nothing to do with democracy.
Is science still valid? Is democracy still valid even though Donald Trump is doing a shit job of it?
Of course it is.
Okay, it's the same thing about science, and this science, the same way I look at science, it takes a while, and it's only, I don't think it can tell you everything, and I think there's a whole spiritual side to humans that science can numberify maybe on some scale related to some model, but it doesn't really mean anything really unless you got that model and that scale convinced by oh, I see if we do that 10% more brainwaves, oh, they like that, I think. Like we can test anything that's natural, but how close our model is to reality is only as much as we need it, like a light switch. When you switch a light switch on, it looks like this, and then it goes boom like that after it reaches a threshold. It doesn't just go bang, right? That's what happens after you put it through the circuitry and filter it and do all this stuff. What you experience is just the light coming on. That's not how it works. It had to be manipulated into a model that turned it into a dichotomy. So you say, okay, off and on is opposite. But I say, well, if you look inside, it's kind of not. It's like a cutting out the bell curve, like you're saying. If it's reached this certain amount, we're just going to consider it on. Forget about what happens, how high it is. As long as it's in this threshold, it's good. Let's turn it on. So that's a fuzzy logic turned into an analog turned into a digital. Right?
Why do you see such a separation between science and spirit? Like, I don't understand why they don't coincide for you.
Well, science can only deal with the physical world. Now, I just got done saying that we can measure a little bit, which I would consider spirituality to be 99.9% inside an individual. So I can measure.
Wait, just stop 1 second. Is that true?
What?
I'm getting, is it true what you just said, that science can only deal with the physical world?
Yeah.
It is true? I'm asking.
I'll put the bets on that. Yeah, that's the whole problem of not being able to disprove
sound?
God. That's why you can't disprove
physical?
God, because he's
Wait
not
a minute.
physical.
Forget God for a minute. Is sound physical?
Yes, it is. It's sound pressure.
Okay.
Like out in space, you can't hear shit. Play it as loud as you like.
So sound is physical, even though we can't hear it. Is thought physical?
Yes, it's electrons.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's neurons. It's neurons. Whatever.
I'm happy for that consensus.
And that might be as Joel's. There might be some nuance in there, but I'm saying that yes, you can see reactions of people having different kinds of thought. Now, could you tell if they're thinking about a ace of spades or a jack of clubs?
That's not what I'm asking.
Well, actually, there's been experiments done where they can read your brain waves, and they can train the system through natural languages of learning. It's called neural networks, and they can say, you know what? There's a picture of a farm with a tree. I see the building. I see the fence. The guy's just thinking it. The picture's being drawn. They'll say, hey, are you thinking about a farmyard? Or are you thinking about a tree? Or are you thinking about the ace of spades? Like, I don't know the details of it, but you can navigate drones with your thoughts now by thinking left and thinking right. Not moving your eyes, thinking it. So it won't be too long. And you can also use electrical magnetic effects to change somebody. You can give them the God feeling, like a spiritual feeling. Certain drugs can do that as well, give you a spiritual feeling like you've met God or something. So I can't say whether they did or not, because I can't disprove God. But what I can say is science can't measure that one.
Oh, it could. It could if they knew what they were doing.
They might be able to measure that you think you met God, but where's the God?
No.
Go ahead, Joel. I'm interested in this one.
Fundamentally, the flow that drives the base of the particles is a fractally orientating field.
Wait, hold on. First, define God, because I don't think we're talking about the same God. Like we already know.
I've already
that, right?
defined my God to you.
I know, that's why I'm saying like the God that I'm referring
to. That is the
to.
God that other cultures believe in, and that is the conceptualizations that the West and science and atheists have distorted and endlessly claimed they have proven wrong, whilst having the wrong abstraction.
Just a few questions. Do you think there's an afterlife where you go to a heaven?
Ryan, I know what the functionality is after this life, so
right. Okay. Do you think that your God can see and hear and actually interacts in your life and changes things?
It is the physical structure of all of existence.
Okay, that's not a God that can that's not a God that can intercede in the physical world. That is the physical world. Right. So I don't have any problem with, if you want to call God the physical world, then we're going to talk about the physical world, and I'm just going to drop the word God because I don't need it.
Colin, I don't know that you're making the distinction that Joel's trying to make, which is one, the religion is a story created to explain physical things. It's a story created.
I don't know about that. It's a story. I think I agree with the fact of sociology effects of it to try to do the best that they could. And maybe, you know, they thought it was good, you know, stone somebody because of something, or,
No,
you know, it was
that's
very
another Western
very
abstraction.
nasty stuff. Very nasty stuff. In fact, it should have a warning label on it.
UK mobile number.
Oh, Jazz, we can hear you, buddy.
Honey.
Just in case you want to know, Jazz, we can hear you.
You have
I'm gonna try
a
to
right
make
to
it again.
a board in India, which you have.
So yeah, I don't have any problem speculating and hypothesizing the best that I can about things that I don't understand. I take offense to Sam saying that I don't have the right to understand something and question it, because I feel I have a good enough relationship with you, Stacy, that you know where I'm coming from.
Absolutely, but when
He
you
doesn't.
no,
He doesn't. I don't trust that Sam does.
Colin, when you jump to asking Joel what he thinks happens in the afterlife, you're showing me that you're not getting the point that he's made.
Well, it's from experience of watching shows where I've watched hundreds of people try to explain what God is to them. So that's what I'm saying.
But you just said something really important. It's from your past experience.
Right. That's right.
Gotta leave that behind. If we're gonna have like good, that's your job. That's your job.
Well, but no, you use your past experience to try to be more efficient. Say less, mean more. That's what I.
Are you trying to be more efficient, or are you trying to understand other people's points of views?
Well, I could ask him. I could say to you, "What's your God?" But he said he's already explained it to me. So I said, just to be clear, let's ask you some questions of what I think a God could do for you that I've been taught as a child. Now, whether that's the same God or not, we have to determine that. That's all. Go ahead, John.
So can I try a question? Can I ask Joel a question for you? Maybe it'll be helpful. I don't know. It's an experiment, and I don't know why I'm getting feedback, but. So if I were Colin, with what I think his questions were, I would say, Joel, do you believe that the Bible can explain what happens after death in a way that you're sure of? I mean, to me, if I were asked, I would say, no, I don't know. I haven't gotten that far. But
that's what he said. He said he didn't know.
I would say no, it's been heavily distorted by people who didn't have the perception or understanding of how it functions within existence. It's been basically children rewriting the story from their lack of understanding of the world. Whereas the ancient cultures kind of knew what the flow was and tried to teach it.
But I also heard you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you don't know yet. You know, that you're not saying what it's like at that point, that you don't know yet. Not that you're saying we can't find out, but not yet.
Because you're playing with an entity that we can't measure in science called a spirit. Because the body does not make it. The body doesn't make it. They rot.
You're being very.
You're looking at the material. The material edges you see, like let's take the example of an atom. We called it atom because we believed it couldn't be broken. But then we proved that even the edge of the atom that we thought was the edge wasn't the edge. That things could go through it and go past it. There is no material. There is a fractal flow of forces coming up from within inside existence, flowing outwardly, creating the dimensional entities you see as atoms. That flow of the thing that doesn't, like, to detect the atom, you need the right frequency of light to detect the atom. What is happening? The light is interacting with another part of existence. That's dimensional relativity.
Yay,
so
science.
Go down the dimensional levels, you need different functions to measure those functions. When you keep going down, you have to keep going down. Then you reach a point where your dimensional relativity to your particles has gone so far beyond the time-space interactive time frame that you're unable to measure it, because your atom, like your particle, has a time frame of existence which is completely and utterly different to the lower dimensional functions and the higher dimensional functions. Imagine what a long frequency would look like to a human looking at a light wavelength. When it's too long, you can't see it because your eyes don't have the detective powers. So the material doesn't exist. What does exist is this flow of force functions that creates everything, that has a nature to itself that is definable both abstractly, mathematically, and dimensionally. All of that works together in such a way that creates these, what seems to be magical functions to people. But it's like when they talk about the magic of words, the magic of words is the ability for you to vocalize a sound, it to be transmuted through the air, which they didn't know at that time, for someone to then hear that sound and act upon it. Even worse, you can cause people to have the complete wrong conceptions of reality and of other people by saying words that was magic to them. And if you think about it in a really beautiful sense, is it not magical that these interactions all work, that you can just say a few words to someone and just from them hearing and abstracting those words, you can emotionally destroy someone? That's all fluidic functionality within existence that we can kind of work out, even if we can't create the numbers to test for it. There is a lot of functionality we can't create numbers for because they're basically emergent functions of existence interacting through endless other emergent functions. Like to oscillate the air, the atoms are an emergent function of existence coming from the base reality. I'm an emergent function of existence coming from the base reality, and I'm oscillating the air to affect lots of other emergent functions within existence to get to you, to then for you to create a cognitive map. All of that, all of the functionality of how that operates, that is how the ancient culture saw. They saw the fluidic type interactions, the knock-on interactions. That there was no relative physical interaction. There was kind of abstract and emergent interactions that happen within this magical space. That's how the other cultures saw it. And we became children, said, you're wrong. But if we look at sexuality within our own species, why did the religions try to stop us becoming over-sexualized narcissists? Would the state of Western culture today be a perfect example as to why they wouldn't want their people to only think about sex, to only think about their ego? Because when you look at our world that's come about, ignoring those rules that our ancestors created for us, the world's a very bad place that if we still held some of those beliefs, wouldn't be quite so bad. Everybody would eventually, like, there'll always be the rebels, because there always is. It's recognizing how individual people's interactions on their own ultimately end up causing other people's problems. Take foot behavior on this. If one generation is sexual, the next generation sees them being more sexual. That generation then copies them and has to outdo them. So they are more sexual. They then have children. The genetics of that more sexualized culture is passed on. The culture of the more sexualized culture is thus passed on. And so you end up with this effect of your culture being degenerated by behaviors of people. And these are the behaviors that religions and spirituality try to teach people the full functionality, the things that happen beyond your immediate conception of the physical world as you see it, as most people understand it. These are highly intelligent people seeing operations within their societies and going, we need to do something about this because it's causing social problems. it caused the degeneration of multiple cultures. Multiple cultures all came up with the same rules because they went through the same situations and saw how functionality was operating within culture. That's where a lot of ancient religion came from, and that's where Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, they all come from that, trying to understand functionality together as a much bigger picture beyond what your mind understands as the physical. Because what we see as the physical, especially back in the ages when we didn't know how the subatomic worked, still had functionality, and that subatomic still was operating and it was still causing whatever functions it does, like emotionalities, biochemical reactions, and chemistry. So they could see that they reached these abstracted functions, but they didn't know the precision like science has learned. But science, like, I'll go to use another one from religion, the act of doing religious ceremonies together, like doing hard acts, flogging yourself, doing hard missions together, fighting through something. Science has proven this has an effect on our culture. Science has proven that the cognitive functions told by religion for us to complete actually has a social bonding and creating effect. If you see someone doing a religious act for your religion, you have more respect for that person, knowing that that person is willing to go through hardship for you, your people, and the people around them. A lot of the point of religion is to teach people the things they aren't seeing, because they have a child mind and the perspective of the world that isn't in line with the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years of our culture existing and emoting. We have always been emotional creatures. And so learning how we emote and interact is possible for thousands of years. Go on, Colin.
I'm glad Sam did restart the recording, because we would be at the 4-hour mark and it would have made him difficult for doing his process with the videos that are longer than 4 hours. I agree with most of the things that you say. And I have a bit of a different perspective, though, on the history and our progress, if you want to call it that.
Because you have the idea of evolution in the thought, and you can't accept the idea of degeneration.
No.
The idea that we've come from something down and then gone back up.
No, I totally appreciate that we've been through ups and downs, and we might have even had civilizations that have been wiped out that are smarter than us, right? And transpermia, who knows, right? Like, these are a lot of interesting things, you know? The Drake equation with the chances of there being life out there, like, that's science trying to measure something. I know, it's like, I know, it's very abstract, but it's reaching the realm of science trying to grip on breaking the atom and going beyond. So they're trying to speculate, you know, what are they seeing? Can their tools go smaller than that? I guess the next, what do they call that thing? Accelerometer, when they put the atoms around and they smash them. Atomic accelerometer or whatever, the great big rings they build. I guess the next one.
LHD.
Yeah, it has to be the next one they want to build has to be like $100,000 billion, and it has to be the size of Europe or something in order to go any farther.
One little thing about this splitting the particles, it occurs to me that when you split the particle and you get different shaped bits of particles coming off and you give them a name, every time you split a particle, you're going to get different shapes and you're going to keep giving them different names. You're not getting anywhere. It's a great pastime, but it's not going to achieve anything.
I disagree, but It's beyond my knowledge
I'm
too.
not asking you to agree
Let
or
me
disagree.
pose something to you, Colin.
Colin,
Well, I'm just saying.
One
I'm
thing
just
that's
saying.
come to my mind while today is that
How confident are you? How confident are you that
Colin,
we're
let
making
him
no
talk.
progress?
No. Listen.
Just
Listen.
wait and listen.
Here is a question for you. Does everything have to pass the Colin test? If Colin doesn't agree with it, then it can't be right.
You never asked me why I don't agree.
You always tell us why you don't agree. That's
No,
why
you
I
always
have
tell
to
me.
ask.
You tell me, buddy, but let's not get into a fight. Ask me. Don't tell me.
Okay. So, with a lot of good scientists, how they actually end up at their conclusions in a lot of sense is they're using their cognitive ability to extrapolate things that they haven't seen.
I can't hear you. Jazz's interlocutor is too loud.
Yeah.
Could you mute Jazz?
I don't have the ability at the moment.
I don't know if I do. Pin video. Sometimes sound gives us ability to do that. Anyway, we'll struggle through. Go ahead. I'll listen clearer.
So, having genii in existence, you have the possibility for people to abstract. When you watch how water interacts with sound, you can figure out a lot of the geometric functionality of existence, because the same fluidic functionality happen if you use two different types of fluid, like a Newtonian fluid and a non-Newtonian fluid. You can very quickly work out the types of force interactions required to create that system. So anybody that's got a great enough mind, from just observing fluid dynamics and having maths, can calculate and extrapolate that every single level of existence works in exactly the same way. And that's what we find. You go to any level of the particles, and within a bit of relativity based upon their dimensional interactions of the various levels they interact with, they relatively do act in that way of there's a force function, it's operating, it drives something. That can be extrapolated easily from someone who can see the functions in nature. You can watch the sea, you can watch water, you can put a water bowl underneath a massive horn and blow on it and watch the different interactions. Water is a very good substance for learning fluidic interaction and accepting that there is that not
What's
really...
the point? What's the point? Like one energy turns into another energy and you can observe that. Like
No.
Like the sound pressure of the horn hits the water, makes waves. Standing waves, we can make standing waves, we can do all kinds of things with water.
Realize it is all the same thing operating on different levels. That is it.
Yeah, the particle wave duality. I think they've decided the wave wins out, haven't they?
Remember what I just said about this edges of an atom? They're not there.
No, they're not. No, it's moving quick. And
what
quantum.
Is there?
Yeah, no, I understand.
What I'm saying, what is there? There is a...
Okay, let me get back to what I was saying about history.
Finish.
Okay, go ahead.
Right, you've got a ball of water, right? In microgravity. Because of the way the water is attracted to itself, it balls. Now, move that ball up and down, and the water will have a wave effect on its outside, right?
Yeah.
But if I was to fire another particle of water at just the edge of the ball, there'd be enough attraction that I could force that particle of water to go around the outside of the water without touching. It is in seeing that there is no real material, but it is in the way that for lack of a better word, having just said there's no real material, the material flowing in such a way that it appears that there is material. Do you understand?
Yeah, I do, and I think part of my problem is what scale of interaction we're talking about. Because if you get down to the subatomic scale, that's the forefront of science. Whether something, you have, there's paradoxes, and there's things you come across where you have to consider the whole continuum as a thing, as opposed to just the last one in the series. Because
Would you like me to give two?
so there's some weird parallels in the physical world that you can bring up. But if we're talking about the world that we can sense with the tools that we have, which we can't sense with tools, quantum physics, okay? We don't. And it's really interesting to listen to Richard Feynman talk about the sizes of things and how we compare things. And eventually you get down to something that's so small you have nothing to compare it to, so there's no measurement. There's no way to put a number on it because you don't have anything that's anywhere near what it is to compare it to. So go listen to the way you measure things, and eventually you don't have a scale that makes sense anymore.
Because you're using abstraction. You're abstracting.
Well, you can use an abstraction, but the whole point of saying it's so many nanometers, and you keep going down. There's nothing that we have yet that, you know, it's beyond comprehension. He goes into a whole I think the video, if you look up Richard Feynman and
I've listened to him a few.
Yeah, he's pretty so I'm saying at certain scales, you know, we have to think and we make these scientific models, okay? The models are not.
Let me just break something.
But models are not the exact representation.
What is one of our measurements defined as? The size of a certain type of atom. But that atom
exactly.
different atmospheres, which means its size changes. So even our definitive sizes change size based upon the existential variable.
Yeah. Well, so once you get a million times smaller,
of those ideas completely, just see the pure fluid, see how it will fold one layer, then its operation in that layer will fold the next layer, then the next layer, then the next layer, and it all has this oscillating effect going up and down and up and down. There is no particles in the sense it's like a drop of water bouncing on the surface of water. It's still water, but because of its current physics and geometry, it can't quite coalesce into the full pool. I mean, you can get water to literally bounce on the surface of other water.
I do agree. Like water has a known surface tension, right? Water has a known surface tension, and the centrifugal forces of going around that bowl. I don't know if you could shoot an atom at such a rate that it would go around the edge of the bowl without touching it. If the centrifugal force had to be a certain amount, as you can think of things that are orbiting other things like satellites. Like, can it be done to satellite close enough to the Earth to not actually touch the Earth? And that's why I got into that mathematical problem. Sometimes the paradox has to be solved by considering not moving an inch closer, but you move to touch the Earth without actually touching the Earth. That's a really strange paradox. I think.
Okay, let's go.
What's it called? The
paradox.
bullet. I think it's called the Reaper paradox. Like, if you shoot somebody and they have to, you know, and they have to. If the guy doesn't die, then the Reaper is going to kill him at a certain point, and then, but half a second before that, you know, another Reaper has to step in, and it's quite a paradox. Of basically the same question as if you keep walking towards a wall and take half a step, will you ever reach the wall, right? Well, realistically, mathematically, you can continue to subdivide the space so you'll never come to touch the wall ever. And so this is kind of that paradox in reverse. You are going to touch the wall. At what point do you touch the wall? So it's really bizarre. Okay. But when you start thinking about that kinds of stuff.
May I add another function in?
Sure.
What happens when you subdivide the bottom, which is surrounded by the top? Imagine a circle of circles, and on your top one, you have your biggest size and your smallest size coinciding in the same space, right? When you subdivide the little one, the bigger one gets bigger because there's more divisions. Do you see that? So the material of existence can be organized into being the divisions. So you have this kind of infinite amount of fluid that can just have its geometry reorganized to create more geometries with the same amount of fluid. But to being in that fluid, if you was a part of it, you would still see your size as being the same, because the functions that make you are still the same size relative to your own experience.
Yeah, and it is relative. Everything is relative. That's why I meant about models, right? Like when they are telling you what a quark is, it's a model of what they're coming to from their observations. Can they split it in 10 more pieces? Maybe, right? Before they thought they couldn't split the atom, right? They thought that was it. But they found these other things. So science corrected itself. But when you're using this Grim Reaper paradox I'm talking about,
to correct itself.
The reason why I brought up the Grim Reaper paradox was because it also crosses over into the apologetics, and people will twist the Grim Reaper paradox to try to prove there's a God, right? So like there's no hope of people trying to manipulate things. And the part that really gets me, and this is a little bit off topic, is if somebody wants to believe something, which I think Jazz was kind of getting towards me, that it's got to pass the Collin test. Well, no, there is no Collin test. It's just whether I can understand and relate to it, whether I understand, whether I can think of it in terms of something else I know. So, and if I can't, then I have to say I don't understand.
I'm trying to get you to understand that you need to let go of all the abstractions to see the functionality. Because as long as you're holding on to the picture of what something is, you struggle with it. Like you can, if you're looking at my hand now from the camera, you see my hand, don't you? But you're not seeing all the functions that are happening here.
Actually, I don't see your hand. I don't see your hand. An electrical image is reproduced into my brain where it's dark. Yeah, so I don't actually see it. I have an impression of it.
The point is, the light has traveled, but I
and
can't
converted to electrical.
If I look sideways now, I mean, where's that light? This is the point.
It appears to me that you have a hand. It appears to me.
Let go of the visual image. Let go of the idea of the light hitting my hand and see the functionality of what my hand is. It is a particle field creating from various particles interacting.
Yeah.
But you see this solid image of a hand. It's not.
How about this one?
Hand.
What you're trying to relay to me is that since a wall has more space than matter, we should be able to, as you said with the water particle, actually walk through that wall or put something through that wall, like a gamma ray, without touching the wall, right? Like we know, and people, it's almost like alchemy, right? You're saying my hand is made up of all these things. Your hand is more space than it is material, right? So, because look at the distance between the electrons and the atoms, right? It's huge, right? And those electrons are spinning, creating that field that, or whatever, that we think is a physical manifestation of something. And you're saying it's not a physical manifestation. It's an emergent property of all this shit moving around.
Oh, sorry. So
does that make sense?
My sister-in-law's called me 5 times and I've turned my phone off every time and she keeps ringing me.
Who's that?
My sister.
We love sisters.
Work out, I've hung up the phone on you a few times. I'm in the middle of doing something. I'll get back to you when I've finished.
I do appreciate that there's things that I can't understand. And I do, but when I was talking about the scale though, it's like we have to think at the scale that we can make models where we can have confidence in something. But who's to say that some kind of a physical phenomenon comes through the universe and warps and warps our gravity so that tomorrow is not like today, right? I expect from science that tomorrow morning I will see not the sun rise, but the earth spin around so I can see the sun, right? Right. So as we go in a vortex through space with the rest of the planets, we're not stationary. We're in a vortex of motion, right? But if some thing entered our gravity zone and changed the gravity, then maybe all of a sudden you throw that ball up, it ain't going to come down again. I assume we would be annihilated before, you know.
You're missing what I'm saying completely.
I'm saying we
the
work
picture
on
is
models.
the hand, right? but it's actually made from something.
Stardust.
A lot of science is stuck on the idea of the thing without recognizing that the thing is driven existentially in exactly the same way as all other things. All of them are exactly the same functionality functioning, and we keep giving them different names as if they're different things. Even if my hand is made from atoms and it's attached to my body, my hand is still surrounded by other atoms. The atoms are made from subatomic things. The subatomic things are made from subatomic things, but all at the same time, they are the hand. Do you see? It is the hand, but the hand is also all the things that make the hand, and all of the nature of existence that makes the things. That nature that makes the things for the ancient cultures was God. That's the word they called that function. To fix it in your head, it's accepting that fractalness coming up.
You're talking about the God of the gaps. That's what you're talking about. Things we don't understand, we use God to reference it.
Right. What is an atom? It is a field of dimensional objects which is organized in a way where the density coalesces into center points, and then from that center point goes outwardly and gets less dense. We say that the object finishes here, but when you get down to the physics of the object and fundamentally how it's all connected, the sub-dimensional functions, say like the electrons, their field could maybe not be there, but out here. And we're calling that the particle. Whereas the electrons, as part of the particle field, are the particle as well. Do you see?
Yeah, our model says it ends here, but in reality, it's all over the place at any time. Like, and I do realize that. This reminds me of the discussion of, I was just thinking a minute ago, I'll think of it. It's the way that the way that quantum physics shows that Newtonian physics only works to a certain level, and then you can't use it anymore as a model. And so that I agree with. And therefore, what kind of assumptions we can make from that are start to get into hypothesis, right? And if we don't have the tools to know how to measure or get a reliable result, like the slit experiment was one, right? That they used.
Like the slit experiment.
Yeah, it's pretty freaky
I know
shit.
the actual function it works.
Yeah, yeah.
If I have an oscillating particle at a slit, and because the oscillating particle is itself oscillating existence, the oscillation travels through both slits, even if the particle doesn't. Very simple. It's quite strange. And they say, then they've even built, because of it, if you observe what's going on, you change the effects. So they've actually built these genius experiments to filter out the aspect of observing it. Now we're starting to get crazy, but you go out there and look at the lasers and how they set them up and all the laser diodes and splitting and refracting. Your decision is connected to existence.
Yeah, so
when you make a decision, the possibilities in front of that decision already start to collapse, because the functional possibility of existence to become that future possibility has already started crystallizing.
And I appreciate listening to that. And this is where I think there possibly unrelated discussions, talking about the forefront of physics and the unknown. I can't remember what the analogy was that's similar to the idea of quantum. I had it. It was a pretty good example. But what I come up against that matters to me is at the level and of the history, like you say, we came from a time when they used sociology and twisted a religion around it to get people to try to find morality. But back in the day, religion was the only game in town. So that's why philosophy came out of religion, because there was no other place for it to come from. That's why when he went to go paint the Sistine Chapel, they kind of told him what to paint. He wasn't going to paint, he was painting religious symbols because that's what he was being contracted to do. Same thing with music. A lot of religious music was created because of who had the money to contract the artists to do it. Then the Enlightenment happened. Thank the living, I can't say God, can I? Thank God. Thank our God that the Enlightenment happened. Because I'll agree with your God, although I see no reason to call him God, Einstein's God. That history from the people who were thousands of years ago were in different society than we are living now. And you're saying that there's some sagacious or old school knowledge that we've lost because of modern's way of packaging everything. And, I agree there's probably something to that. Like I appreciate the Native American way of spirituality, of Mother Nature, right? And when they put cement on the ground, was that a mistake? Should we just have bypassed the shopping mall idea and just planted gardens? Like, is the shopping mall too far?
Sorry, Colin, you've lost me.
What I'm saying is we keep progressing over history of what's acceptable, right? So I'm back not to talking about we can't even start to explain because we don't understand what quantum physics is. I'm saying, okay, well, forget about all that. That's all fun and dandy. But the other conversation, which is more interesting to me, not the Big Bang, as I've told Jazz before, if you find the Big Bang that exciting, then maybe we should have a BigAng show, right? But should we drag the GCC through
I don't refer
that
to
again?
the Big Bang. You misquote me, and you lose yourself, and you lose everybody else.
Well, I'm sorry if I misquoted you, but it was about, I don't know, maybe it was what was before the Big Bang? I don't know what you asked.
You're trying
Questions
to
I can't answer.
make a point about.
Yeah, but I find that boring. I find that boring.
Shopping.
I find that conversation boring in the terms of
I
what's
find
more
your
important.
conversation boring. You're taking a shopping mall to try and explain something that I heard.
No, I'm talking about humans not appreciating nature and paving it over.
Looking at each other.
Yeah. So
yeah, I don't mind talking in that fashion where he's talking and I'm talking.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way I can put the point into him, is to interrupt his flow of thought.
I know we were talking about the Big Bang. That's all I know. And I suggested that we
No, you were talking
we
about enlightenment.
No, in the past we've had a discussion where I said
now you were talking about enlightenment and Einstein with Joel, and you went straight to a shopping mall because we've lost some.
Because Joel's talking about the fact that religion and all of its corruption was created from a sociology effect. And I'm saying, as we take those morals forward, did we go too far when we said, oh, fuck all that, let's just pave it? That's a good way. And I'm saying the Native Americans say, hold on, you just paved Mother Nature. What are you doing? And that's ancient knowledge. Okay, so I'm agreeing with Joel. That
your analogy is cockeyed.
Well, it might be, but you understood it anyway.
Saying, Colin. Everything that comes to you, you interpret in your own fashion, and then if it doesn't agree with your fashion of interpretation, you don't accept it. You're not changing your stance.
First of all,
the Indians are wrong, the Red Indians are wrong, everybody's wrong except.
I didn't say you were wrong. I said we don't have time to break it down in a 2-hour show when we're talking about something else.
We don't have time. How many hours do you want?
During Saturday barn raising? 2 hours.
How many Saturdays do you want after the barn raising?
Well, this is what I'm saying. If it's that
You're
important.
not saying anything.
You could
wasting time. How much time do you want in hours? And we will allocate you those hours for the rest of your life.
I don't want to allocate my time to be lectured on something I find that's out of scope, but not thinking.
Well, I don't want to be lectured either, because you're lecturing.
Right. That doesn't mean that I don't think that you have a right to say what you want to say or what you're saying is uninteresting. It's just something that I think is misplaced, trying to build you could say a university course on what I thought you were talking about, which was the
Not the
beginning of
university
time.
course. Let's
Beginning
get
of
a
time, I
course
think.
that's acceptable to college.
No, it's not
Just
about acceptable.
college, nobody else.
No, we get to vote as a group what we want to do. I'm just making a suggestion that we can't get into all that
You're
right
going
now.
around in circles because you can't take something like that and say, I want to find something out of that. Nobody else can do that for you.
Okay, here's the question. How is knowing what the beginning of time is going to help me when I'm trying to figure out how to have better conversations?
Which one do you want out of those two?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think
No.
us spending a lot of time, us, you and me, now the rest of the group can, and if they say we're going to have a show and Jazz is going to talk about the beginning of time.
No.
That's fine.
You asked a question, a binary question, one or the other. Which one do you want first? Then we'll come back to the other one.
I don't want the one about the beginning of time because I am suspecting, for my purposes.
Then let's talk about how to have a better conversation.
Yes,
Start.
that's what I'm
How do
interested in.
you want to handle the conversation? You, Colin, nobody else.
Well, I would think that we would have different options depending on the topic and context, and we should respect that.
Fine, agreed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm just saying some of the conversations we bring into the GCC, not just you, me, Sam, a lot of people.
No.
We don't have time to break it down. We don't have time.
You're doing it again. You're
That's what I think.
involving third parties.
So what? This is the GCC, buddy.
Don't complicate things. What is it you want to know? Or what is it you disagree with? That's what the crux of the matter is. This is what it comes down to.
What
Just
do I
you.
disagree with? I would say it's more what is my lack of understanding and and how do I prioritize and ask others around me how to align to the topics that are most meaningful, because we can't talk about everything, as curious as I am, at the same time, all in the same space.
Pick one.
Well, right now I'm trying to think about the conversation between the definitions. We're on definitions, really, me and Joel, about the history. And it's kind of a theme going on right now is the benefits of religion and how it's a social structure and all those things. I agree with all those things. Then we got off into micro-nuclear physics.
Hold on.
That's
You made
interesting, but not on target.
One point. You made 1 point. Stop there.
Sure. Go ahead, Jess.
Now, this is what if you don't structure it point by point, then you're going to lose not only you, you're going to lose me.
Right.
Okay?
Perfect. So I'm talking about the usefulness of religion.
Hold on. I haven't finished. Out of that point you've just made, I would refer you back to that point.
Usefulness of
What is
religion.
it that you don't understand of that point?
Well, I guess I've challenged some people recently to go into religion and find what's missing in the Humanist Manifesto. And if it's missing, maybe you can propose to put it in there.
Hold on. Okay, I'm beginning to understand that's what you did in your little write-up about a week ago.
Yeah.
You want to compare religion versus the Humanist Manifesto.
No, I think religion is part of our existence. And can we shake off the superstitious parts we don't need so that we can uncover the stuff that Joel's talking about that may be worth discussing?
Hold on. Again, you want to shake off superstition.
Yes.
I have a phone call. I'll come back to that. Superstition. I'll come back to that.
Yes.
I'll continue with that point. Sometimes what people call superstition is a lack of understanding of the perspectives that are
Yeah, and that stuff I'm into.
So
how do you tell the difference between superstition
Guys, mute your mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. What's good superstition and bad superstition, to put it simply? There are probably good, and we're getting into Stacy's world of opposites, so I'm saying it's a continuum, right? So
okay, so
what lessons were useful from the history of religion, the good morals that were given to us to treat each other better, as opposed to the things that are missing of the Humanist Manifesto. That's what I'm saying, because I think we could shake all of the woo and come down to what actually, but I'm not saying everything's woo. Like I'll admit I might know about 0.000001 of stuff, maybe. Like I know nothing because there's so much unknown, right? I can't even measure it. But with the models that I can use, try to make sense of things, one of them is I see it as a progression to have the Humanist Manifesto instead of a spiritual document. What would be missing would be if humans needed to be tricked into the tribal religion in order to have good community. And you're saying, well, I think religion makes good community and trust. I agree.
Okay. So let's go to something fundamentally.
But that's not religion. That's people getting together.
You've had your moment. Let me say my.
But that's not religion.
My
That's
next moment is now.
Go ahead.
Okay. So let's go on human functional ability. The cognitive brain power of each individual is unique. We know this spectrum. So the ability is a scientific function. The same variances on our eyes, our ability to smell, etc. What I'm saying is people have had the perceptive ability to see the scientific functionality.
Yeah.
Not using scientific tools, not using the scientific method, but just
sloppy. It's a little sloppier without it. That's all.
Was at the bottom of the page.
But it's all being driven by the same function.
Changes.
My eyes are still being driven by the function I'm trying to teach you.
No,
Wait.
Go ahead. I'm not denying that there's other ways.
I'm trying to teach you how the flow functions, a model, create each progressive layer, and how those flow functions were known in the past.
You're saying what is reality composed of? You're saying what is reality composed of, really? Which is kind of an ironic thing. But that's what you're saying. What is reality, and are you actually aware of what reality is before you're making your assumptions?
Remember, your emotions.
It should be there somewhere. I just had it.
Of that reality. Your mental cognition is a function of that reality. All of these things are still being driven from the very fundamental thing that, say, the Hindu and the spiritual religions see as God.
Right.
When you click OK, you will be taken to the confirmation screen.
Everything is an interaction with God. And it's the emergent interactions that become the more woo-woo, because...
Could you mute Jazz?
No, he's done it himself. But
okay, good.
It's very difficult to explain to someone who can't see what you're talking about what is happening.
Oh, so I feel you, buddy. I feel you.
Is really smart, perceptive people who can see the functional ability of other people and are trying their hardest to teach them what to become. You said religion was used as control, but originally it wasn't. It was very much, this is the way your life will work if you follow these things.
It was very authoritarian, very.
That's what it became.
I don't agree. I don't agree.
Of course you don't.
No,
but
because I think it was a cruel world.
The Sumerian and Hindu history of their religions, and whilst they did have wars, they see existence not as the West does. The West has this moral perspective that there is this only one right way of being morally good, but that's utter nonsense when you learn how abstract cognition works. You quickly learn that the spectrum of emotional relation is quite wide, and the spectrum of abstracting is quite wide, and all of that is based upon knowledge and perception. So you've got science who has a lower perception trying to tell people who have a higher perception they're wrong and not really giving them the chance to learn.
That's wrong.
We are still having this fight with Buddhism and science today.
No, you're right about that.
Buddhism are winning. Buddhism are showing what they learned, how they learned to change their mind was truth. even if they had some abstractions the West didn't agree with.
Yes, I'm not saying that the Bible is 100% evil or false. I didn't say that. Neither is Harry Potter.
But you're trying to say they evolved. And
I'm saying people have evolved, and the story has come kicking and screaming with the evolution.
Right.
But you're saying evolution isn't a thing?
The function of species is what it is. The geometries we can become are what we can become.
Well, that brings me to
that. It's a very difficult choice, because that means, fundamentally speaking, certain types of behaviors will always lead to the consequences. And that is one of the things religion is very dogmatic about. You will not do this because we don't want our culture to become that.
But religion doesn't own that thought through supernatural means.
You're the one applying supernatural onto it.
That's all the religions I know of. I haven't found a religion yet that doesn't have a supernatural in it somewhere.
Because you're not looking at the functionality of existence as being one thing. You're separating what you consider to be the supernatural.
That doesn't get you a God.
Perfectly functional.
It doesn't get you a God. It gets you a one. But that doesn't have to be a God.
Where's our consciousness?
Good question. And I was just going to bring that up. The thing I forgot that this reminds me of.
I've just told you.
Is will. Do we have free will? Do we have free will? Or are we deterministic?
That one in a conversation you've been here too. The functions of what we are as a life form are of what they are. The decisions we make in each moment is causing the collapse of time in front of us. The possibilities get crystallized as we make decisions, and the possibilities from this moment to the forward become definitive.
Yeah, but some people will argue that we don't have free will because our brain and our subconscious has already decided before our conscious can. But I don't know about the conscious, subconscious being the proper duality, right?
Those people are abstracting the functions that are part of you as being a separate thing.
Yeah.
Those things are a fundamental part of you. Right. So those cognitive functions of your brain are your dimensional entity. It is your dimensional entity that has caused the functions that caused the decision. They try and dismiss it as pure function. Well, of course, existence is made from an operational thing. So of course that operational thing has knock-on effects. It's fundamentally obvious that something that's working from knock-on effect functionality will have a knock-on effect functionality to cause and affect the next thing that's going to happen. It's kind of from the idea that things are static, that it's not that. As I've explained, even the particle is not static. It is a flow function constantly functioning to create itself. There's no static particle, and even the energy that was the particle within the time frame of perceiving it has changed. Technically, it's now different energy making that particle.
But what does that get us? What does that get us?
It's just the understanding fundamentally
of how
and I'm saying operate.
I'm saying to understand religion, I don't need to bring that into it.
But that
what does that
what
get us?
Religion is teaching people what existence is and how it functions.
And what I'm saying is
keeping the Western perspective. You're the one accepting only Western abstractions.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. I accept what can be proven.
What can be proven without the ability to prove
and
it?
And then I accept that there's a whole lot much we don't know.
I've sat here and explained to you the functionality that creates all things on all levels.
I didn't say it didn't, but it doesn't help. No, it doesn't help explain some things. Like that doesn't help. It doesn't help.
Like what? Give me an example of what it doesn't help to explain. And I'll show you.
It does not help to explain how we could use the 10 commandments of conversation to have a better conversation.
Yes, it does. By
How?
understanding
Go ahead.
the spectrum of emotionality and the spectrum of abstractionality.
We don't need that level of detail of the subatomic.
If you want to have a good conversation with other people, you need to understand that the subatomic is a part of their emotionality. It is a part of the thing that defines what their emotions are. Their emotions don't exist without the subatomic. They don't
I can give you an
exist
example.
without the fundamental function of existence.
I can give you an example that I think could relate to what you're saying. Where
Okay.
could religion be something that is very beneficial to somebody? Well,
By someone having not knowledge and being taught that knowledge by people who are willing to teach them.
well, what I'm saying is that if somebody was trapped in a cave, and the air was running out, if they could think of something that could calm them, they would have more oxygen and more time to be rescued. That could actually be the difference between life and death, the fact that they believed in something that calmed them down.
Okay.
Whether it's true or not, it's an issue.
Stop for 1 second. I'm really sorry. Can I just stop it for a minute so I can restart the recording? Because I don't want to not be able to get the transcript.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so wait, I just need help. I got to go slow. I got to figure out how to do it. So
Yeah. So I think defining what we're talking about is important, and
no,
being
I
able
need help. Wait a minute. Help me to learn how to stop it and record. Don't keep
Jazz
going.
might know.
I don't
Jazz
have
might know.
access to the same tools as you do.
I don't either.
Stacey, I'll stop it. Okay.
You got it?